I'm on a date tonight, so I'll have to just look good at I'll just do it in front of her, shouldn't I?
He's kept going, he's scored! Oh, Stockport pressure. And the header into the superb goal. Tony did it. Lisa! Rose tries to get the ball in. Wilkinson! It's a 5-star performance from Stockport County.
All right, we got a small house, but we got a big bloody heart, I tell you.
So hi, it's just me. There is no Nick. Every week, Nick does the whole, so we use a platform called StreamYard, right? StreamYard is a web-based platform. We go in before and we set it up. And I am so laid back about it. Like, I've not spoken to Nick all day. I think I spoke to him yesterday, maybe. And I just rock up normally at 1 minute to 8 o'clock even with the best of intentions, and it's just there and I click on it and it's there. Today, that is not the case. There is no sign of Nick. I have messaged him. I've done my very best to set it up. I don't think it's set up to his standards at all, but I'm here. We're here. We can talk about stuff and we'll see how we go. So welcome to this week's episode of SK3 TV, where it is just me, Hannah. I'm sure Nick's fine. Obviously, like my kind of the way my head thinks, it's like, a little bit concerned about this. But I have messaged him. Hopefully he's having a nap, which funnily enough was what I was doing when I probably should have been getting ready for a podcast, and none of this would have happened. So it's been a bit of a weird week. It's international break. As before I went to sleep, I think it was 2-0 against Albania. So that's been happening. There was a whole exchanging shirts at half time thing, which I've never seen before, but I suppose, as it was pointed out to me, if you were an Albanian player, then you would. Honestly, if I was playing against County and I thought I wasn't going to see the second half, then I'd be asking. I mean, a Jude Bellingham match-worn shirt must go for a fair amount. So I do get it, but it did strike me as a little bit weird. And then Stockport County ladies played today. We can do a little bit on that. And on Tuesday, there was the whole Wigan longest game ever, most pointless penalty shootout ever. And the fact that there was actually a game in there is I don't know, it feels like with everything that went on, with all the pitch, with all the pitch inspections, with all the stoppages, kind of gearing up for there to be a stoppage before there was one, the fact that there was actual football played feels a little bit kind of secondary to stuff. So let's start with that. Oh my goodness, like, I should do admin. I'll do admin as well, because then I feel like this is my like submission to the whole, I don't know, like when you get reviewed. So speaking of which, if you enter awards, it's really it's an interesting one in that you don't really just get given an award. You have to enter, like physically enter award and send a submission of what you think is your good work. Some of them like are nominated. The football content awards are, and then the interesting one about that is you pay for your ticket to go. You don't pay to go, you don't win. So but that's not, I mean, people make a fuss about it because a lot of people doing football content obviously aren't getting paid. In industry, it's really, really normal to have awards shows, awards entries, and people do them for the kind of the marketing clout. So it's quite normal. So this can be my submission to another award that we're not going to be winning. We haven't entered any awards. We haven't gone down that route at all, obviously, for obvious reasons, because this is the level of professionalism that we've got. Just if anyone, Dan, do you have Nick's number? If anyone could just message him and, repeatedly check that he's all right. I'll just chat. I'll do a little phone check before we get into the fact that Nick is missing. No sign of life. Right. So Tuesday night, Wigan. It looked a bit wet, a bit unpleasant. It wasn't a game that anyone was particularly excited about. I think by that point, we'd heard a little bit more about Ollie Norwood's injury, in terms of that he'd had a knock in training. There was a blood clot. He'd had an operation on it. They were keeping it open for a few days, and then closing him up. And there's the recovery from the wound. There's the recovery from the original kind of flesh trauma, and then the kind of getting. Because you go from, obviously with a hematoma, you go from having the trauma that exists anyway, but then you've got the wound on top of it. Keeping the wound open is to make sure that you don't get kind of additional swelling. Obviously, there's been trauma kind of inside, so it's giving that chance. Like, it's obviously all very kind of sanitary. It's packed and protected and to prevent infection. But it is designed to allow the kind of swelling and everything that's happened to go down before they close it back up. So a week or so on now, we can assume I feel like we should have a countdown, like 8 weeks, 7 weeks, and then it won't be, will it? Because, like Artu Hoskonen, you're told that it's 3 weeks or it's 3 months, and it's the middle of November. And as someone's pointed out, he'll be on blood thinners. So what they'll be trying to do is make sure, that he clots properly after the operation. But then when you're on blood thinners, you have to be really, really careful with potential impact injuries and anything like that. And I clearly can't talk. I've had a birthday this week. Ollie Norwood is approximately 10 years younger than me, so I can't comment on this particularly. Well, I can, but he is older as well, and that does kind of play a part. He does keep himself very, very fit, obviously. Anyone who's been to Carrington will have seen him. He, like, on the exercise bike that they have in the recovery room, he exercises with like full woolly hat on. And he also does a 20k bike ride after training most days even. So he is incredibly fit. His blood oxygen levels will be incredibly good, oxygen saturation, all of that. But, as you get older, it is something that does affect people more. Speaking of, there's also been stuff this week about Duncan Watmore, who was at Middlesbrough, most recently at Millwall, apparently training with County at Carrington. Now, Ollie Norwood, this is something that Ollie Norwood did similarly and ended up signing. There is no suggestion whatsoever that he's going to sign for County. He's been linked with Sheffield Wednesday, particularly. Interestingly, Sheffield United this week have signed Patrick Bamford until January, which doesn't bode particularly well for the lovely Louis Barry, who, just to temper expectations and also for my own good as well, there is some interest. I think he's being expected to be recalled back to Villa, but there is interest from the Championship. So the chances are, as much as we would love to have him back, if there is that interest and his wages are, the tail end of 20,000, as in, I think 27-ish. It was what he was on when he was at Hull. And they've probably gone up since he went to Sheffield United. There's normally loan fees. We know that the loan fee when he went to Hull was $1 million. I'd expect it to be similar for Sheffield United, but obviously don't know. And it makes much more sense that a Championship team would be willing to put money up for it, or more money, shall we say, in a way that matches Villa's expectations. So although, you know, there are plenty of loan deals out there where the player doesn't get their full wage, or the player gets their full wages, but it's paid by the parent club. There are, you know, as the parent club, you would want a player to for the club to take on as much as you can. Kozia Dewberry is another. I hope it's Dewberry. It always makes me sound like Dewberry What's it? I feel like I'm probably not saying it properly. He's obviously on loan at Bolton at the moment, and the Bolton fans are absolutely adamant that he won't be going back in January. I think it'll be interesting to see, because he has done well. You know, fully expect he's after Ollie Norwood, he's the second highest rated player on fantasy football in the EFL. He obviously won Player of the Month along with. How have we got 16 minutes in of me talking to myself and trying to come up with things that we haven't mentioned? It's collective. It's a collective responsibility that I have not mentioned that Dave Challoner won Manager of the Month for October, which is an incredible achievement. He often gets overlooked for things like that, and I think we kind of take him for granted. But the fact that, like, last season he wasn't even nominated for Manager of the Season it's still, whenever I think about it, I'm like, oh yeah, that doesn't fully make sense to me. So back to Duncan Watmore. So there is no suggestion whatsoever that Duncan Watmore might sign for County, but I can imagine a scenario where, especially given our various injury crises, shall we say? No, that's unfair. Is it an injury? Yeah, I think it is an injury crisis. What determines an injury crisis? More than 3, 4? We're definitely there. Obviously, I've not heard any updates about anything. You know, Onyango, Ollie Norwood, it's all been quite quiet because there's not been a game, so we've not had the normal cadence of updates from Chally. So again, back to Duncan Watmore. This is what a conversation with me is like on a Saturday, when I will just go off on massive tangents. We're actually lucky that I'm managing to pull myself back to remembering that I was talking about Duncan Watmore, because honestly, normally that's not the case. So Duncan Watmore, I can see a scenario where he would sign until January to get some match fitness. Like we talk over the summer and going into the start of the season, especially with loan players who haven't had a full pre-season, that match fitness is very, very different. And so if he could get some minutes under his belt, and it helped us as well with a team that he's been playing with for at training for we don't know how long, if he is looking at going out to somewhere like Sheffield Wednesday that are apparently interested in him, then it would make sense. So that's kind of rumour and conjecture. What else is going on? As far as I know, the Railway and Tent has survived Storm Claudia. So I'm at the bottom of the garden. I've not been down here since, I don't know, Thursday, maybe Wednesday. And I found a plate, like a sheet of glass in the garden, and one of the doors has come off. So hopefully the tent is unscathed. I imagine that to be the case, but not heard otherwise. I don't think we would we? It'd all be fixed by the next time we're at home if anything has untoward has come to it. And I do really enjoy that we've embraced the fact that it is a tent. It's very Stockport County in terms of the reaction with the away fans and taking them baked goods and all of that. I think that's super fun, and honestly it's the best way to deal with that level of criticism. This week, Swindon, I think it was this week, Jake Tabor, who is the lad that came up from mainly step 6 but step 7, signed for Swindon in the summer. I did an interview, Liam and I did an interview with him on Lower League Look before he signed for Swindon, because he was having trials all over the place, and there was interest from Barrow, and he even had some League One interest. But he's one of those, I think he was the player, the headline stat is that he was the player that had scored the most goals like anywhere in the football pyramid last year and possibly the season before. Anyway, he signed at Swindon. He's been on loan at Bath, but was recalled middle of this week, and he had done this 6-7 video. If anyone is blessed with tweens or teenagers, the 6-7 thing is there's a whole, they do the hands like 6-7, no one can say where it came from. There is a band, I can't remember what the band is, but they're a bit dubious ethically and morally rather than dubious musically. I don't know, they probably wouldn't even call themselves a band. That's probably a very outdated term. But they teenagers of Charlotte in the airport, you're lane 6 to 7, 6-7. It's really really fun. But they put out a video of Jake Tabor playing with some kids going 6-7. My goodness, the amount of I don't know what you'd call it, taking the piss, essentially. Now, Jake, bless him, he's the loveliest lad. I mean, I guess he's early 20s, I think. But, he is living the absolute dream at the moment. And the fact that he's being paid to get sent out to schools as a representative of a League Two football club, who are second in the league at the moment, he will be enjoying it so much. And so they've got him doing with these kids. The abuse, honestly, ridiculous. But what Swindon have done, rather than kind of leaning into it and finding ways to, I don't know, make it more fun or just lean into it, they've taken it down, which is a massive shame. I can't wait for, at some point this season, Swindon will win or lose 6-7, because it's Swindon, that's what happens. So we'll see then. Similarly, and again, I feel like we're doing a bit of a roundup. We'll get back to Wigan, maybe. They will, Sky Sports this week launched Sky Sports Halo, which was Sky Sports' little sis, which in itself is incredibly reductionist language. That said, I've got a kind of interesting take on it. So it's been scrapped. It was a TikTok channel that was designed for women sports fans. And it was designed to be, it wasn't just about female sports, it was about everything. And the idea behind it was that it would bring, and Laura Kirk-Francis, if you don't follow her, she's on Instagram particularly, very, very funny lady, who is one of the actors on the Paddy Power advert. She's the one with the long ginger hair. And she was saying that it's the type of content that she does. It's quite light-hearted, it's funny, but it's smart. And what Sky Sports Halo was any of those things. It was taking weird trends and take a trend and make it football. So you had a video of Erling Haaland running down the pitch and making it the hot girl walk with a matcha trend. It just didn't make any sense. The content didn't match the commentary, if you like, or the slogan. None of it made sense. So that's been pulled as well. So we are leaning into our decisions. We're owning them as a club, which I love. I think there's a lot going on at the moment. I've got Vitality health insurance through work, and normally, so every week I get emails from them, and I opened one this week because it was a men's health thing. It is just because I feel like I should draw attention to it, because on International Women's Day, it always gets mentioned as to when International Men's Day is. Well, the answer, the International Men's Day, is on the 19th of December. So get ready, however you're going to celebrate it. Organise your events at work. Men's health is a good angle to go at, and I've got some resources that I can send you if you would like them. There's also some really good resources on the County Community Trust website. So the interesting thing this week is that I got an email from Vitality. Vitality have hundreds and thousands of members. I mean, in the UK particularly, I don't know whether they're global, but they in it was a link to Stockport County. There's a picture of Mark Stott, and it linked through to a video that's available on the Community Trust page, but also on Vitality, about walking football and the things we're doing there. There is loads that's happening at the moment in terms of DEI. We've got a health and inclusion officer who is still relatively new and has his own additional needs. So I think it's always important, right? And this is the interesting thing about Halo, actually. Halo, the team that put Halo together, are entirely female and young. And normally the advice would be, don't expect or don't kind of imagine that what a particular group of people are going to be interested in. Ask them. And they haven't. Almost they've built it, I guess, in what they thought was right, but then didn't do any audience testing or anything like that. So we shall see. Right, back to Wigan. Like I said, there was football in there. There was an absolute worldie of a goal from Corey O'Keefe, not in the kind of traditional worldy sense, in that it wasn't like an Ollie Norwood banger from the halfway line, but it was a run that started in his own half. It was technically and tactically just stunning to watch, the way that he kind of weaved in and out. This was before, it was raining at this point, but it was before the ball was starting to stick. It was quite early on, and just finished it beautifully. I loved it, not least because of all of the abuse that Corey O'Keefe had got post Saturday. Like last week on the podcast, we talked about how statistically he had created the most chances. He was the most creative player on the pitch, all of that. And then that happens 3 days later. And it felt like Charlie had, been sticking comments up around the changing rooms that he'd printed off from the website and from social media. And it had just put this fire in Corey O'Keefe. So that was great. The counter to that came quite quickly in a goal that arguably was a little bit dubious anyway. Came in from the corner. It was all a bit messy. No one really knew what was going on. Corey seemed to go up for it, and then honestly, if ever there was an argument for an own goal to be given to a goalkeeper, it was probably that. It was one of those, I genuinely, as a kind of a human, I worry about him. I've always had a proper soft spot for him since he was at Crawley. I've talked about it a lot. And I worry about his his kind of temperament, I think he feels things very, very deeply. But with that, he, like, the defending was indefensible, but also it was the way that he stood up and he just kind of put an arm out, like, I don't know, there was no ownership of it. There was no, God, I should have done better. It felt like he was instantly and without reflecting, deflecting the blame for that onto someone else. So we're sitting there at 1-1. The pitch is getting progressively worse. If anyone has seen, and I'm sure you probably will have done because everyone in the world has seen it, Dave Philbin's video from the main stand of the poor linesman, who there is a shit ton of water coming off the main stand roof. I mean, people have said the roof was leaking. I don't think it was, because it was just the volume of water. The guttering couldn't cope with it. And it was like the linesman had his own kind of singular rain cloud, like in the Truman Show. And so the linesman's moving, and then the water's coming down the side of him, and then it follows him. So it's tracking him perfectly. The poor man was absolutely drenched. I mean, the Wigan shirts, I think they were like a dark purple. They looked like they had nothing on the front of them, because it was a like slightly black logo. I think the sponsor was black as well. You just couldn't see anything. Visibility was bad. But more concerning for me, and less so, I mean, you could see that the ball was starting to travel differently, is probably the best way of putting it. But that kind of line under where all that water was coming off the roof was just getting wetter and wetter. Players were like sliding in to the bench. It was a, horrible disaster of a thing. And I was absolutely convinced that someone was going to come away from Tuesday night with an injury. And I think, I've not really talked about the team selection. I think it was stronger than people necessarily expected. I think that reflects the fact that there is no game until Thursday. So we were running from Tuesday, like 10 days until the next game. Also, a little bit of a sense of it's not, it's the Virtue Trophy, so it's not the most important. So there was kind of balance of that. There were a lot of the young players on the pitch, which we obviously saw kind of coming on at the end. And then also you've got a team who needs to learn to play without that kind of linchpin in the middle of the pitch and the directing. So Owen Moxon, who had played on Saturday in that kind of quite deep-seated Norwood position, was the captain, which I thought was really lovely for him, given he's another one that I worry about in terms of like some of the stuff that's gone on off the pitch, some of the things that Charlie said about, what was it, lapses of concentration. So I think that was really nice. I hope for him it showed that, he's trusted, that he's a senior member of the team, that, he has that ability to direct play. And that's what he was doing at the beginning of the game against Luton. But I think he's one that, as the goals racked up, I felt like we saw less and less of him, kind of physically on the pitch, but also in terms of, how he was talking to everyone else. So that was really nice. But the pitch got worse and worse. I was worried about injuries. So eventually we had this 15-minute stoppage, which turned into longer. Just as they're about to go back out, the rain starts again. Thought the referee was really enjoying his moment in the sun, if you like. he was, talking to the fans, talking to backroom staff, really enjoying himself, kicking the ball around. I mean, I suppose at that point they were that wet that you don't kind of even notice, do you? Meanwhile, Salford are... So at one point, Salford were losing to Wolves. But by this point, I think Salford are like 4-1 up. So the outcome of this game starts to matter a bit less. Obviously, it was a 7 o'clock kickoff, so that comes into play in terms of there was a deadline of 11. There was some discussion about what would happen. Apparently, it goes to the EFL for them to decide. Well, what would it be, the EFL? Don't know. I mean, I suppose it's a league trophy, isn't it? So, I forgot that I had wine. Should have gone on this earlier. So no one really knew what the outcome would be. Obviously, if it stays at a draw, then it goes to penalties, which, I mean, they had a goal disallowed. Fairly sure. I was fairly sure at the time. Looking back, even more sure that it probably should have stood, but as it was, it did not. It wasn't given, and it goes to penalties. At this point, no one really wants to be there. There's been a load of late last-minute substitutions, which I didn't really think through in terms of what that meant for penalties, because this penalty shootout doesn't matter whatsoever. You get an extra point, so it doesn't matter. At this point, we're going through as runners-up. All good. I don't know which was worse in terms of my kind of, again, these players that I do particularly worry about from a purely kind of maternal human perspective. Owen Moxon with I don't know, just the softest penalty ever. And Corey Adai, who absolutely smashed it, like the perfect penalty in terms of power, positioning, which reinforces everyone's kind of opinion that we should try him at right back one week. I mean, he started off life as a striker, didn't he? So that was started off life like at 3. Corey Adai was a striker, I don't think. So Corey Adai took a beautiful penalty, but it was one of those I was like, no, I don't want to watch this, and he absolutely nailed it. So I hope that did his confidence some good. I mean, goalkeepers do tend to take penalties, but it tends to be like right late on. We saw it in Grimsby United, and Christy Pym, who is a United fan, taking a penalty against whoever the Manchester United goalkeeper is. I've got no idea. Is De Gea still there? Unana? Like, no idea. This is the thing. I was talking to someone at the weekend, and they were a Premier League. Well, they were an Arsenal fan. And I was like, I know nothing about Arsenal. I was invited to go to England, Serbia on Thursday night with free tickets and, nice kind of thing. I was like, honestly, I'm the wrong person for it. So I am someone who can tell you, lower league players from the last 2 years, but I have zero idea who United's goalkeeper is. Anyway, I digress. So it does happen, but infrequently. But it was nice for him, and it was nice to see the younger ones stepping up. So the winning penalty, or at least the final penalty, was Bruno Sina. Now, Bruno Sina is academy. He is technically first team, he's got a squad number and all of that. I think he is sponsorable. I'm not incredibly sure about that. But he played for the academy last year, played for the first team a couple of times. I think he wore number 40 last year. I feel like he's not got that number this year. but he did his MCL towards Lee wants to know where Nick is. We don't know, Lee. If you know, then let us know. We're struggling along. Apparently we're 40 minutes in now, so we're all in this together. I keep saying we. Yeah, this is what's happening tonight. It's fine. So yeah, Bruno Senna did his, I think it was ACL or MCL last year. He is from Brighton originally, so he'd had the operation and he'd been recovering at home. Had to all intents and purposes young, so expected to make quite a quick recovery. Again, this kind of speaks to the difference between someone like that and then someone like Ollie Norwood. And this was his first kind of reappearance. Also, not the first, I think, but certainly a notable reappearance for Nathan Mapengu, who is notable for having scored the goal against Blackburn in the 6-1 defeat. That was so much fun. So yeah, that was nice. It was, I mean, even Bruno, poor Bruno, scores the goal and just looked like at least that meant that they could all get dry. I mean, sitting on the bench for however long, in and out. It's really funny, the Sky comment, because it was on Sky Sports Plus, the Sky commentators were saying, oh, I don't know what kind of facilities that they've got in the back of Edgeley Park, like in the changing rooms, you know, in terms of them keeping warm and things like that. And I'm thinking, nothing. I mean, the poor Wigan players would, I mean, it's like a school changing room, the away dressing room, and then the home one is obviously better, but they don't have, or didn't last time I was, that sounds really weird. Last time I was in there before the Lincoln game. Steve took me on a little tour with someone, and there's, you know, there's no space. They do have Jaffa cakes though. I'd like to, so, you know, all the creature comforts, Jaffa cakes, flapjacks. But I was really impressed by the Jaffa cakes. And now I consider them health food and can eat a whole packet of Jaffa cakes in one sitting, which is both impressive and embarrassing. I don't know. So that was Wigan, and they've presumably dried out. I hope that they had a lie-in on Wednesday morning. Then we drew Crewe in the cup. I was really, really hoping. It was really funny. So what they do is they have the winners on one side and the runners-up on the other, and then they kind of mix them around. So we were up against Crewe, Bolton, Harrogate, which I was like, Harrogate, I've been manifesting an away draw at Harrogate for literally years now because I love the pies so much, and the gravy is the one that they make with the black sheep beer. It's impeccable. And I wonder if Harrogate are at home next weekend. They weren't at home yesterday. I checked, but I didn't check next weekend. So we drew Crewe away. On our side of the draw was us, Barnsley, Blackpool and Bradford. So arguably, I'd rather have had the other side. I'm trying to think who else there was. Crewe, Harrogate, Bolton. I think it's someone in the second in League Two. Anyway, so that's coming up. We've also got Cambridge tickets will be going on sale this week. £15. Don't know how I feel about that. FA Cup tickets traditionally have been 10. They are doing £1 tickets for under 13s, which is great for me because Charlotte is in fact under 13. So I guess it kind of evens out. But thank you, SMB. That, like, if it's not ice cream, it's pie enabling. So Harrogate are at home to Walsall on Saturday, which is especially interesting because I think I'm interviewing a Walsall player in the next couple of weeks. So maybe that's what I'll do on Saturday. And now, you see, now I've lost my train of thought. It was inevitable that it was going to happen. But yeah, so we've got Crewe, Cambridge, £15 tickets. it feels fine. It's a way, I guess, for them to Saturday at 3:00. You know, bearing in mind these tickets are normally, well, they're season tickets, aren't they? So they're, you know, but face value is between 24 and 26 quid. I don't know. I feel like at least it's not full price, but I don't know. £10 is kind of what I feel like we're used to for cup games, but our operating costs are presumably higher than they were, and you know, all of that. Yeah, SMB suggests that maybe Cambridge wouldn't agree to £10. One of the interesting things about the railway end is that we can say, if you have away supporters in the same stand as the home supporters, you have to charge them all the same. And so technically the railway end, because it's separate, can have its own price tier, but there is a good practice type approach that goes around. You shouldn't, if you've got, I don't know, £15 tickets available, then you should make the same. There should be some tickets available at the same price point to away fans. Other kind of interesting developments in terms of the offering is that for anyone in the wheelchair spaces, they can, for the first time, take out, which is bonkers, that, you know, that even that this hasn't been done manually in the past, but I understand why. Stewards have iPads, and they can take food and drinks orders from wheelchair users, and they can pay like at the terminal in terms of the iPad, pay for their food and drink, and it gets delivered to them, which is an incredible thing. I know the club are looking a lot into the experience, you know, you've got all those kind of like standard accessibility things, like the number of disabled spaces in the car park, the you know, ramps, the lifts in the Cheadle end, access, all of that. But for me, that was important because it's going one step further, and it's improving the experience and kind of replicating that match day thing. And, you know, cynically, it's also good for the club because it's additional revenue from those people that they might not necessarily have had, which is very cool. Right, Peterborough. So as I was faffing around panicking as to why there was no studio set up for this podcast, still not heard from Nick. I'm sure it's fine. It's 2047. Oh, and Alison, who is the CEO of the Community Trust, she's messaged me. Dan hasn't. Dan has actually, but Nick hasn't. To say that the community work was featured on the EFL highlight show this week. So that's a nice one to go and look at as well. I haven't watched it because why would I? I was sat at the Trafford Centre watching K-pop Demon Hunters yesterday afternoon, which was really fun. It felt like an opportunity to do, because we talked on the podcast last week about going to Buxton. At one point, I was going to Rochdale Bromley with a friend who's a scout, and that was a game that he needed to go and watch. I looked at Hyde, Warrington, and loads of games, and then the weather was just so horrid that I offered to take Charlotte to the Trafford Centre. The Trafford Centre was horrific. I don't know whether it was let's go to the Trafford Centre because it's dry and it's indoors. But it took me half an hour to get from the Trafford Centre car park to Costco. It then took me half an hour to get from Costco to Starbucks, like the Starbucks that's like literally you can see it from the Costco car park. And it was horrific. It was like the worst of people. And it felt like it was a week before Christmas. I don't know if there was something that had caused it or something else, but yeah, so I was watching K-pop Demon Hunters in the car. Don't recommend it as an alternative to Saturday football. But so I've got stats for Peterborough. Now, the stats for Peterborough should be taken with a significant pinch of salt, because they have obviously had a horrific start to the season. Manager's just been sacked. Fine. Could see it coming. I mean, that man has been in and out of Peterborough Football Club more times than anyone can remember, partly because he is very, very good friends with Darren McAntony. They go on holiday together. Like, their friendship will kind of survive this. It's not something that we should be concerned about. Not that we would be concerned about it anyway. But you can also guarantee that Darren will have talked about this on the podcast if you want to go and listen to it. Now, a few years ago, it was someone that was writing for the same thing as me. And he was involved with Peterborough. And at the time, they had talked or wanted to talk to Luke Williams, who was at Notts County. And there was zero interest. So obviously after Notts County, he went from Notts County to Swansea, didn't do brilliantly, and has been working as a baggage handler at Bristol Airport since, which I genuinely think just shows like his character. You know, I've talked to loads of football managers when they've been out of work, and the ones that have impressed me the most and the ones that have come back stronger. So look at people like David Artell after he left Crewe, kind of, I guess, similar to Luke Williams in terms of, Swansea weren't doing well. He'd done very well with Notts County. He was absolutely adored there. Difference with David Artell is that they'd been at Crewe, they'd been relegated. Lee Bell was kind of in there waiting. But what they did, Ian Barraclough's another one, they go off and they do something else. They're not just sitting at home. And Ian Barraclough said to me as well that it's not normally the case that you sit there on your full wage packet. So, you know, when you hear about managers being sacked and being paid off, it's unlikely that they're taking that full wage. So that's something to be kind of mindful of as well. But, you know, they are getting some kind of income and have some time on their hands, obviously. So David Artell and Ian Barraclough actually went and did football leadership courses. Luke Williams is working at Bristol Airport, presumably just to do something and not to kind of sit at home rotting. I can't imagine that he hasn't had interest. So the minute that it was looking like Ferguson was going, I said to Dave and Nick, I was like, Luke Williams, Dara was absolutely enamoured by him. And I think it's a really good fit. Obviously, since he arrived, they have changed. But the reason that I say that in the kind of context of the stats is that Luke Williams plays a very specific style of football, which, you know, we know from his time at Notts County. He always had an awful lot of respect for us, for Stockport County, for Chally. And, you know, at times have played a kind of very similar style of football. So that said, so Peterborough's stats so I'm looking at, I should have just done a screen share, wouldn't I? And then we could play with, I don't get away with this very much. Did I always do, did I say new manager bounce? I don't know if I did. New manager bounce, new manager bounce, new manager bounce. Nick doesn't like it at all, but Nick's not here, so right, hang on. Let me see if I can do a screen share. I feel like, you know, we collectively that have just, you know, struggled through all this today. Share screen. Let's see. This might go horribly wrong. Yes, it's working. So this is the 25-26 season. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, probably more gentlemen, to Huddle Stats Bomb, which, you know, as we learned a couple of weeks ago, for £80,000 a year, you don't get FA Cup access. You probably do a wee League Cup there? We're going to have a look at that in a minute. So one of the things that I really like when we're looking at match previews is comparing the team that we're about to play with us. It's not an exact science, of course it isn't, because with XG, with PSXG particularly, a lot of it is dependent on the teams that you have played. So we talked about, or we have talked about, that we had actually quite a tough start to the season in terms of the games that we were playing. So that was reflected in our stats, and it will be reflected in Peterborough's, largely because they've been quite poor. So we've got, look, right, so we can do it per 90. Let's do it per, no, let's do season total, because that's probably a little bit more reflective. And then look at all the different, these are all the different metrics that you've got. So you've got goals and XG, you've got like, that's, so Huddle Stats Bomb, as much as I love it, it's not necessarily the most intuitive. So that there, that's a like a header. I can't click on it, it doesn't do anything, but so it's basically the goals and XG section. So let's look at non-penalty goal difference. So like I said, Peterborough have not, but they're not going to be, they have got a new manager bounce. I think obviously time has passed, but they are not, that's goals conceded. So obviously you want it to be higher for the team. Open play XG. So this is because an awful lot of our goals have come from set pieces. So that's quite common actually when you look at it kind of against other teams as well. I wonder, is there somewhere there'll be a, so set piece goals. So you would have expected to see that kind of based on that metric. That's why we were like, things were all a little bit more even. Let's see, penalties conceded. It's felt like I don't know, penalties. Yeah, so it's one of those where this season it's felt like we've been given a lot of penalties, but at the same time we've obviously conceded penalties as well. Whereas Peterborough there have scored the penalties but haven't conceded any, but it might just be that they've not been awarded. What else? Is there anything else that we want to look at? But look at it. This is why I get so lost in stats. Throw-ins is interesting. So they were talking to Charlie on Soccer Saturday about throw-ins and how it's kind of becoming trendy again. And I started noticing, if you had like Luton, there was no one had a long throw. I think it was at Plymouth where that was not Nick. Every time I get a message, I'm like, is that Nick? It's not Nick. What else have we got down here? Passing percentage. That's sometimes a good one. So one of the things that I really noticed against Luton was that the pass completion, as much as it looked incredibly chaotic, was actually quite good. Peterborough have a kind of similar, well, Luke Williams has a very kind of possession-based approach. I love, and I keep meaning to find it and like pin it to my Twitter because I mention it all the time. There is a video of Luke Williams talking about short corners and about how really all that happens if you bang a corner into the box, the likelihood, like the percentage chance is exponentially higher that it's just going to get booted out and then the opposition go on the counter and there's a higher chance of them scoring than you. And so that's why he goes with the short corner and passing it out. But he's so tactical and strategic, but also really, really open with kind of talking about those kind of tactics. Is there anything else? Pace towards goal. I felt like we've been a little bit slower with that this season. I think we've missed Tanto's pace. Is there anything else? Goalkeeper. So OBV is on ball value. So that takes into account like all the different metrics of when we're in possession. Oh my God, I've done an hour. I've only had 2 sips of wine as well. I feel like it might have been more entertaining if I'd had more. Maybe every time I said Nick, I'd have to take a drink. We could have done that. So on ball value looks at, again, you know, defensively. Our stats always come out well for on ball value, particularly for the defenders and midfielders, because they're doing so much work in terms of getting the ball forward and starting those plays that end in chances. So apparently, oh, you can't read it. Oh, well, never mind. Hopefully you heard some of it. That's a shame, but it does make sense, especially if people are watching on little screens. That's also not Nick. I guess that it will be bigger on the old YouTube. I'm not going to inflict myself on you anymore. I'm quite amazed that we managed to get through an hour. It's Peterborough on Thursday night. I have found someone. I don't know why I think this is any safer than not having someone. I found someone on Twitter who's a county fan, appears to be a county fan, got some mutual follows. It'll be fine. And we're getting a train up from King's Cross to Peterborough and then back on Thursday night. I think the train is at about 25 to 11 on a Thursday night. So if anyone else wants to join my little train party, I am, as a woman traveling alone, often really reckless, probably, with my personal safety. And but the idea of being on a train on my own at like 11:30, midnight, going into London didn't fill me with a lot of expectation for good things happening. So let me know if you want to join our little train party. And is there anything else? I don't feel like there's anything coming up. How many people are watching this? Oh God. Just like amongst friends, because this feels like a non-official SK. Let me just see if it's still on. There was a bit of a glitch in the shop last week. So if you go on the shop app, as in not the county website, so it's the shop app. Let me see if it's still there. Yes. So this is a reward, a treat, if you like, for sticking with me for the last hour. So if you go to the shop app, it's called Shop, and then search for County Store in there. There is a extra 20% off your order. So it applies off sale stuff as well. It's off shirts. It works on everything. I don't know whether it's a pre-Black Friday thing or whether it's accidental. I think the code that comes up is something about Vita stuff. So we'll skim over that, but it's working on everything. So there you go. That's your reward for sticking with me. Thank you. I know it's not been normal. Didn't even do the admin, like, subscribe, share. Maybe don't actually. We're sponsored by Blackbird. They're on the pans and the grills and the fryers at various places in Manchester. I'm sure they're really good for Christmas do's. And yeah, so we'll see you next week post Peterborough on Thursday. I'm sure I'll have done some. I'm well up for going to Harrogate Walsall now, quite honestly. So might sort that out. And I'll be back. Oh, interest. Did I say this last week? Did I say that the pies were a bit better? The HM Pasties pies felt like a bit better. It felt like progress. So there's that. Yeah, okay. So thanks so much for bearing with me. Really appreciate it. Hope it was at least little bit informative, and hopefully Nick's okay. We'll report back and see you next week.